Vaush, do you like the game? I am happy to announce to all... I'm reconsidering my opinion on the game. I'm giving it some thought, and my initial impressions might have been overly positive. Anyway, this is of course one of the things that I like about the Dark Souls games, where you can fight groups of enemies in Dark Souls, but they never just become a homogeneous blob. You always have to be incredibly careful of all of them, all the time, because even the weakest enemy can knock you off rhythm. The damage number getting too high cheapens the experience, I think. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's a problem that MMOs have a lot as well, where every time new, like, gear tiers are released, they want it to be, like, a lot better than the last one, you know, to make it, like, fully relevant, you know? You don't want people to feel like there's no point in getting the newest and best gear. But usually this scales exponentially, which is, well, I mean, you know, you get this massive... You know, WoW has had a stat crunch twice now. People were doing DPSs in like the hundreds of millions or some shit. It was like a whole... What do you think about the enemies in these games being completely without personality or depth? I don't know if I agree with that. Most of, you know, the From Software games typically take place in a society which is either collapsing or has collapsed, so usually the enemies you fight have lost their mind, but I don't think that makes them without personality. The bosses are dripping with personality. I mean, like, so often... I mean, oftentimes the bosses are sane enough to talk to you, you know? And in that case, like, they literally have, like, a personality in the most overt sense, but even silent bosses often communicate so much through their behavior. It's one of those subtle touches that really makes these games special. For instance, you know, Gwyn and King Vendrick in Dark Souls 1 and 2 respectively, both of them by being, you know, kings deposed of power, just sort of mindlessly guarding the seat of power they once held. I think there's so much about the way they move that conveys their state of affairs, you know? Sif, the dog in Dark Souls 1, is sane when you fight her, and she recognizes you if you've already gone back in time to kill Artorias and save her from the abyss, from the dark. There are more... What's a good example of a boss that conveys a ton of personality with no dialogue? You know, a sane boss, or a boss that's somewhat sane, you know. Artorias does, that's for damn sure. 100%. Gwendolyn? Yeah, Gwendolyn... Well, Gwendolyn talks. The Abyss... Ooh, I love the Abyss Watchers. The Abyss Watchers, the way they're still tearing at each other all this time because they keep recognizing the dark in each other. They're just like automatons. But not really, they've just lost their greater purpose. Ludwig the Moonlight Blade, well, he talks. Nito because they're real Nito. True. Yeah, people are just like naming all the bosses at this point. Seath? I don't think that Seath's boss fight conveys... Fuck you! Any personality. Seath the Scaleless is a pretty disappointing boss fight for a number of reasons. Priscilla talks? Yes, Priscilla talks. Maria from the Bloodborne DLC? Again, Maria talks. Like, if you want to go, like, this boss conveys a lot of personality, Lady Frida. Well, yeah, Lady Frida has a fuck ton of dialogue. Of course. I will say, and I'm cheating a little bit here by breaking my own rules, but my favorite boss in all of the Souls games so far, haven't finished Elden Ring, you know? Also haven't played Demon Souls. Slave Knight Gael. He does talk a little bit, but I feel like even if you were to forget all of the spoken dialogue, such an unbelievable amount is conveyed. I just want to ramble about that. Fuck, man. When you fight Slave Knight Gael to begin with, he's huge and animalistic. You know, he's consumed essentially all of the Dark Soul, and Slave Knight Gael has been fighting to recollect the Dark Soul for his mistress for basically an infinite length of time. Guys, would you agree that's fair? An infinite length of time, all of the cycles, deaths, and rebirths, he has persisted with the unfathomably dedicated purpose to reassemble the Dark Soul from all of them, from all the constituent parts, just to make some goddamn Dark Soul paint. Anyway, so he's been fighting for basically infinite time, so he fights like an animal. Why the fuck wouldn't he, right? But when you wound him in his boss fight, and he bleeds, he sees that he's bled the blood of the Dark Soul, that he's actually succeeded. My personal headcanon, I don't know if this is confirmed or whatever, but my headcanon is after fighting for an essentially infinite length of time, Slave Knight Gael became so strong that it had been essentially an eternity since he was last wounded. He hadn't seen his own blood, just mindlessly consuming all other creatures which bore the Dark Soul, all children of the furtive pygmy. And you, finally, after all that time, wound him, and when he sees the blood drip out of him black, he realizes that he's already succeeded in his task. Probably he did millions, billions of years ago, but now he knows it. And the moment he sees that, he goes hollow. The moment his task is complete, the moment he has reassembled the Dark Soul, the one singular driving force that has kept his sanity together, however fragmented all that time, he instantly hollows. And that's confirmed. Only in his second phase do weapons which deal additional damage against hollow enemies deal additional damage. He loses his mind right there in an instant. And the thing that I really like is, as soon as he goes hollow, he fights like a man. I don't mean like a macho, but like he fights like a human. He fought like an animal during the first phase, but the moment the second phase begins, after he's lost his mind, he fights like a human. He stands upright. He uses swordsmanship. He even uses crossbow and weapon arts. I mean, it's as though hollowing burned away the infinite time during which his sanity had been eroded to an animalistic point, and in his hollow state, he was reverted only to his purest instinct, and that instinct was still rooted in the humanity that he had fought for and in the name of all that time. Does that make any sense? Hollowing reduced him down to his fundamental parts and burned away the animalistic nature that he had adopted over all that time. Now, all of that I just talked about is conveyed exclusively through the mechanics of the fight itself, and I think that is fucking brilliant. I think that is spectacular. The idea of a person who's been fighting for so long that they become more human when they lose their mind is such an interesting concept that I legitimately don't think I've ever seen done anywhere else, at least not in that way. A boss dripping with personality in Sekiro is the headless ape. That is true, actually. That is true. What is the lore behind hollowing, etc.? It's been a while since I brushed up on my lore, and keep in mind this is Dark Souls, not Elden Ring, but if I remember correctly, the first flame exploded into existence, bringing about an end to the Age of Grey, the Age of Stillness before it. And from the first flame, 4 great entities drew out 4 souls, one of which was the Dark Soul, drawn out by the furtive pygmy, who multiplied it 1 billion times over. Rather than hoarding the power for himself, the furtive pygmy created humans as a species. And pygmies and some other stuff, but, you know. They all became beholden to the Dark Soul. And hollowing was when, if I remember correctly, Gwyn, the wielder of the Soul of Light and Father of the Gods, did what is referred to in Dark Souls lore as an epic troll moment. See, the first flame was dying, and with it his powers, and he desperately needed to fill the first flame with more power. And the thing was, all of the souls were dwindling except for the Dark Soul. The Soul of Light, the Soul of Life, the Soul of Death, all of them were weakening, because they were tied directly to the first flame's power. But the Dark Soul, now that it was tied to humanity as a whole, was growing in power, because humanity was growing. So basically, Gwyn did an epic troll moment, and he bound the Dark Soul, and all who carry it, all humans, to the first flame, imbuing them with a set of properties. Eternal life, but eternal dependency upon the bonfires around the world which are linked to the first flame. Those are the bonfires that you rest at. Essentially, humans lived eternally, but in so doing, when they die, when they lose purpose, when they weaken as humans, as people, the power in their Dark Soul gets bled away into the first flame. Essentially, he put an undead curse on all things that belong to the Dark Soul in order to prolong the first flame, which I don't even know if it did that. It might not have, I don't know. It did for a little bit, but it still ended up dwindling. Yeah, weak kindling. Yeah, hollowing essentially means that you go undead. Well, most humans are undead at that point, I think. Hollowing means that you're undead and you've essentially lost your will to live. So, for instance, if I recall correctly, the Estus flask in Dark Souls is literally just tasty juice. That's not a joke. It doesn't actually heal you. The only thing it's actually doing is sustaining your will to live. You drink it and you feel better about life, and it takes a little bit more damage for you to be sent back to the fire. And the more you're sent back to the fire, the more you hollow. My lore memory might be a bit rough, but I think that's the gist of it at least. Estus is literally fire in a bottle. Yeah, but the purpose of it is to invigorate, not to heal. It does nothing physiologically to reduce your injuries. It doesn't heal your body. It just it's hopium juice. What is the HP it replenishes then? Heart points? Your health in Dark Souls is represented by your will to keep going. As I understand it, it's represented by your will to keep going. When you run out of health, what you've really run out of is the will to continue. You briefly lose your will to continue. You fall apart, and you're brought back to the bonfire. Hollow. If you remember in the first game, after you die, you awaken hollow. You're like a corpse, you know? Your soul is no longer cogent enough to maintain your physical form. In order to look like a human again, you have to burn through a humanity sprite, and those are relatively rare in the game. That's why it's called vigor and not health. Yeah, possibly. Anyway, again, it's been a while. I think that's the case. Remember that headcanon where every hollow you encounter is another player that didn't make it? Actually, if you want some real nightmare fuel, you guys remember how in Dark Souls there are corpses of hollows everywhere? Sometimes they're like frozen, basically, like they're like rocks almost. They're completely immobile. If your sword hits them, it makes like a tink noise, you know? Those entities aren't dead. They're as alive as you are. They're undead. They're immortal. They can't be killed. They can only lose the will to live, not life itself. They're still alive, frozen consciousnesses locked in bodies that no longer have the willpower to move. And they have been for all time. Hate it when that happens? True. So basically they have depression, and they will for all time. I'm pretty sure that the only thing that actually killed the undead, the only thing that succeeds in killing them, isn't it being burnt through by the first flame? That's actual death. Because at that point you're being consumed by the entity that prolonged your life with the undead curse. But even that stops, right? Because by Dark Souls 3, the Lords of Cinder are entities that have been sacrificed to the first flame multiple times. Even death and being turned into ash aren't enough to release them from their eternal shackle. Yeah, even by the point of Dark Souls 3, even being sacrificed to the first flame isn't enough to put people to death. Even Ash reanimates. You are literally Ash. You are the Ashen One. Even Ash comes back. Being burnt to atoms is not enough to kill you. You always come back. Why do NPCs die in Dark Souls, though? When you kill NPCs in Dark Souls and they don't show up again, the lore explanation for that is that your death was enough to make them go hollow. They're still in the world, they're just wandering around lifelessly, like a zombie somewhere. You can actually see this in quite a few of the NPC quest lines in Dark Souls 1 and 3, I don't remember about 2, where if some NPCs, if they follow their path far enough, will go hollow. In Dark Souls 3, doesn't Sigvard of Katarina experience this? At the end, he goes hollow after having defeated Yorn the Giant. Solaire goes hollow in one end to the quest line, I think. Horus, that's right, Horus does. No, he kills himself. Oh, that's right. Isn't there something about Sigvard going hollow somewhere in one of the games if you do something wrong? He goes hollow in Dark Souls 1? Gotcha. Oh, Sigmire. Sorry. It's not Sigvard, it's Sigmire? Okay, sorry. Also, Sigmire's daughter is not actually undead, so killing her would mean actually killing her. The thing that I always think about that's so strange to me is that, at least in Dark Souls 1 and 2, there are real human civilizations that exist. Isn't that wild to think about? Like, while you're an undead traipsing about Anor Londo, you know, like rolling your way up flying buttresses and killing silver knights and shit, somewhere on the other side of the world is like a village where people are chilling and eating like sandwiches and stuff. Isn't that weird to think about? There are in 3 as well, just not as many. It's harder to think about them. I'll tell you this much. There certainly aren't at the end of the DLC, the Ringed City in 3. Do you think there could ever be a Dark Souls 4 with how 3 ended? No, I don't see how. That would be incredibly silly to me, I think. It would be a very, very silly thing to do. You could conceivably make a Dark Souls 4 where you, in the painted world of the Ashen One, since that's the canonical ending, but I don't see the need. Clearly, From Software is capable of making brilliant games of this style outside of that particular franchise. What do you think about the theory that the painted world is Bloodborne? I don't believe that. It's fun to connect these universes, but I don't think there's any reason to believe that. Wasn't Sekiro the painted world? No, I'm pretty sure the painted world was just the painted world. Fuck, it's so pretty, dude. I can't get over how nice it looks. You know what I really appreciate about this? They're actually incredibly tasteful with the bloom. I really don't like overdone bloom in video games. And this is obviously very bright, but the brightness feels authentic, you know? Not like they just cranked up the bloom on all the light, but like it's legitimately like a brilliant, divine light. It feels that way, not just like they were like, okay, it has to be bright, so let's make all the bright dials go up. This game is so gorgeous. This game is so gorgeous. Are you playing on a controller? Yes. I would never play a From Software game on mouse and keyboard. On a recipe for disaster, that would be a nightmare. You know, speaking of the lore of Dark Souls, and I guess From Software games in general, I feel like they do an incredibly nice job of mixing power fantasy with disempowerment, you know? Because while you're playing the game, it is quite a power fantasy, right? I mean, the game beats you up, but you're meant to overcome these challenges. You feel so cool when you beat these bosses, right? It is a power fantasy. But at the same time, the universe of these games is always meant to be disempowering, which I really respect, because naturally it would feel contrary to the design ethos, right? You would want in a game which is a power fantasy for the things you're doing to feel powerful to be really, like, meaningful in an existential sense. Usually when games are power fantasies, you don't just feel powerful. The stuff you're doing is of the utmost importance, right? Like in Doom, for example, in Doom 2016 Eternal, you know, you're not just having a great time killing enemies. You are doing that, but, you know, it's also meant to be cosmically important. It's a great battle between the angel people and the demon people, and you're the great Doomslayer, and, you know, that makes you feel even more powerful. With these games, man, they just hit you with it over and over again. You can win, you can lose. It doesn't make a difference, folks. The universe is a dark, cruel, and unforgiving place, and your victories are not going to change that. And I respect it. You changed the world at the end of Dark Souls? Not in the most meaningful way, though, right?